Joining me on stage is Andy Walshe from Liminal Collective, and one of the foremost experts, I would say, on true peak performance as well. So we're going to show a video in a moment.
We thought we'd C'est loupé.
Ça y est, mon Vince, on y est, c'est le bon jour. Allez, on y va. On est parti.
Attention, attention, go!
Le faut qu'il se laisse des contacts.
Ok, vous pouvez voler sur moi. Ok, j'ai contact avec le ciel. Contact avec le ciel, c'est bon.
Et go for entry, go for entry.
Ok, on est en approche. Les bits qui se rapprochent. Il est bien bas, assez loin. Voilà, il se rapproche.
Okay, we've got one. Ready for the second one.
Yes! Yes! Oh my god, bravo les gars! Les oiseaux sont au nid.
So these are the type of people that Andy hangs out with
In a past life.
in a past life. Actually, the way that Andy and I met is Hame Watt, who is also one of our supporters that Niremia co-invests with often, connected me to Andy, and I went to an event that he used to have with Liminal Collective down in LA, and I was blown away by the quality of people there. So, Andy, could you share a little bit about your background with high performance?
Yeah. So that was my old life. And so we were talking today about human and machine teaming. And I want to make the point that we've been doing it a long time. It's just now the machine's a little smarter than the plane. But the reality is, I started in human factors back when it wasn't a thing. I was a part of the original Institutes of Sports program in Australia, where we pull together scientists and Olympians and try and win medals. That led to a lot of different paths, but fundamentally we got to work over the years across just about every elite sporting community in the world. Back in the early 2000s, the US government got very interested in that, so they ripped us over into some of the special mission communities and the intelligence communities. And then that sort of extended, especially during the Red Bull days. They got excited about the action sports community. So that was where I really started to learn what it takes to be a high performer, because that was I think I had at the start about 1,000 athletes in 170 sports, from Formula One to skateboarding, and everyone was number 1 or 2 in the world. So that talent pool of lessons and learnings and the science and the technologies that went with it. The most important part of that program was they also gave me their culture program to work with, so musicians, artists, filmmakers. So I really started to learn what it takes across that spectrum. And so now we sort of sit between elite sport, elite military, some leadership, skill work in corporate, and the creative community. And it's just been a lesson and learning along the way.
Yeah, for me, it's like I went to this event and everyone was professional athletes, special forces, Cirque du Soleil, Olympians. It was amazing. It was just really, really amazing. And so But, in that context too, and what's very relevant for AI is that one of the other things that Andy has done quite a bit is human and machine teaming. And so he does a bit of work with governments and who have actually been using machines, very precise, very expensive machines for a very long time. And the importance of the surface layer and the interaction between the human and the machine makes a big difference. And so as we're moving into agentic AI, this is actually hyper relevant for everyone, not just the military. And so could you describe some of those programs a little bit, the ones you can?
Yeah, what we've seen, and we get called in for these elite programs, and so the easiest message for the room is probably our highest performing teams right now, the ones that are really at the very edge of what we think is possible for a teaming environment. Everything we're doing is human-machine interaction, which is fun because as leaders, you all know, a team of humans is a pain in the ass. It's complicated, there's a lot going on. You start adding these agents, systems, proxies, it gets exponentially more complicated very quickly. But the point of that first video, it fundamentally boils down to the same things. It's trust. Trust with the human, trust in the plane won't crash, trust in the pilot. So we're seeing in these programs, and we're doing a training camp this weekend, actually. We've got a group of hackers they're sending out from one of the government programs. So these hackers are learning, as an example, their environments where they have multiple agents running, proxies of themselves. These advanced teams are really what we call network teaming. There's yourself, there's your proxy, which is a digital version of you that has a little bit more of your decision capabilities, and then all the agentics that it works with. But then you've got the humans working together, you've got the proxies working together, and then you've got the agentics all working together. So it gets very complicated very quickly. And so I wouldn't say that they've figured it out yet, but these models have been running 10 plus years, so there's a lot of interest in how they work. Our job, just to be very clear, is I have no technical I don't even know how to turn on a computer fundamentally, is we're still in the human-machine equation where we triple down on the human because we've pretty much given up on the machine. The machine's got you on pretty much every capability of intelligence and basic knowledge. So it's the things like they're going to learn, we double down on character, Stephen's work, creativity, all our work from our music and artists is actually informing our highest tactical operators right now. So it's a wonderful world to see this cross-pollination of talent.
And one of the things that I always also thought was interesting about it is, one of the things that is going to happen with the future of work that we're going to see is we're going to see what's being called flash teams. And so in a flash team, and Melissa Valentine was here on Monday, she's at the Stanford HAI, she works on that a lot. It's sort of, teams coming together for a specific purpose, task, reason, and they come together and then they break apart and other teams come together. So it's this constant sort of teaming and reteaming and teaming and reteaming. And so that's been true in consulting for a long time. They do that a lot. Also, the whole gig economy, that's happening. Gig workers are essentially teamers and reteamers. And, also when you sort of extrapolate forward, many people feel that we're going to see that in more and more areas of the economy. And so when you're thinking about these teams, how do you get the teams to be able to very quickly come together and to be able to be very productive and to have high outcomes? And so there's also a lot of insight. The other day we were talking about the super teams that you work with and how they come together. Could you share a little bit about those characteristics that you see of the really truly high performing teams?
Yeah, I think so. In the premise in the workplace, it's pretty easy. Like job descriptions are done. There's no jobs anymore in these elite programs. There's problems, there's projects. The teams form very quickly, whether it's tactical teams or other innovation teams. no one has a real role anymore. And so the challenge that I think people say, well, it's hard to build trust. Well, the trust is a combination of many things. What really differentiates these teams is that they really have the selection down. The selection is very clear. It's highly selected, and the standards of operation or the standards of work are very high. So you can throw them together on any project, and there's not this requirement to sort of prove yourself or show what you know. And there's a high level of trust that everyone knows what they're doing. So they form very quickly, and they can form very critical scenarios and very dangerous scenarios. And it doesn't require much from us to accelerate that trust. We don't need to do a lot because there's that foundational level or acceptance that they've already come in. So in the corporate world, we're seeing a little bit more of that we expect you to come in with these standards. The knowledge base of the standards is not important as much as it used to be. And so in all these teams, the fundamental premise that we've always operated on and now is becoming more prominent, I think, in the business world is we sort of hire for character over competence. Competence is expected. You should be good at what you do. We don't even care. We don't care the school. It's the character and how you show up, because that's how the team then forms very quickly, because there's high trust, minimal ego, ton of humility, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're able to have very candid and very quick conversations, very open conversations, because of that level of fundamental character that they all possess. So it's interesting to see that in the highest performing teams 15, 20 years ago, they've always hired for character. Now, as knowledge trends to zero as a cost, I think we're seeing the trends that I think in many of these situations that the competence has become less and less relevant and the character becomes more relevant. And it does work powerfully. And that's all they select on.
Yeah. And so think about that. So, already, the entire knowledge of humanity is on the internet. So, being able to recite facts is not a competitive advantage, because the facts are there. Anyone can get to them. And then now that we're starting to have, agents and models that can do more processes, like start a Excel spreadsheet, go through all of these invoices, and find the discrepancies, those sorts of things that were sort of a big chunk of, in any given job, there's a set of tasks, and a big chunk of those tasks are things that, AI is really good at, and it isn't necessarily the special thing about you, right? And so with that, when Andy first said that, when he was like, it's not about competence because, the models can do a lot of it. And also one of the things that we've seen is that, not just at high performers, but, people who are, average are really supported by models as well. So not only is competence, for regular tasks, not special tasks, but regular tasks, being something that high performers can use models to do those. Additionally, like moderate performers or average performers get a higher level of competence. So competence is going to be like facts. I really want you to catch that. Competence is going to be like facts. And so if competence is like facts, then what's left? Character, your ability to work with other people. That's why Vital, Mesh, all of these things, that the story we've been telling you across the day is really important. And then, and then in our conversation my conversation with Andy the other day, when you said that, I was like, how do people strengthen their character? Like when you've seen high-performing teams or people training into high-performing teams, because you work with organizations, especially with, the military, where they are training into not just competence, but also for those other things. Like, how does one do that in an organization?
Yeah, and I'll just clarify it, because I can see people there's a threshold level of competence that we just expect. So this is a high-performing team, so it's not. But another way to think about it is high competence and high character is almost ideal, but what Nichol just mentioned, we really love high character moderate competence or low competence, because those people are humble, they want to learn, they'll do whatever it takes, and they can be trained, and we can train you pretty much in anything. What we never want in your, well, you don't want low competence, low character, because that just means you suck at selection, but you want, the worst thing in a team is high competence, low character. That will destroy your team. It's the worst thing to hire for, and people do it over and over and over again. And without getting political, geopolitical, look at the leaders around the world now, even some of the tech leaders. High competence, moral judgment, character is lacking, and it's a dangerous conversation, because a highly competent person can game the system very well. So that's the challenge. Now, to train it, people say, and character, we use many definitions. Many of you may have values on your walls or things that you speak to. The classic 7, empathy, compassion, trust, courage, creativity, those things are the ones we speak to, so that you can train that character. You can select for it really easily. You just make things more and more challenging for the group of people you're working with, and very quickly they'll lose their false avatar of who they want you to think that you are, and they'll show up as who they really are. And I'll take that to the extremes. That's why you see those horribly miserable military selections. They're just making it more and more miserable to find out who's going to push the other person under the bus first. And they're gone. Take that back to the real world. In the corporate world, we do some cognitively challenging things, not so much physically, but we do create scenarios that are challenging. And it's not a selection event, so we're not cutting anyone, but we're actually understanding who in the team is and where those positions are, and it's more self-awareness for them. And look, this is where you struggle, and people will struggle and show up more quickly when things get more challenging. If we really want to stress a corporate team out, and we do this, we restrict their sleep for a week, and we make things a little uncomfortable. And if they're a very executive level C-suite, we give them bad presentations, and we won't give them an agenda, and they start to freak out. And we're layering the stresses on them very carefully and watching the behaviours. And when something pops that's less ideal, you pull it out. That's the candor. You say, look, we know you didn't mean to show up like that or do that or have that conversation that way. It's how do we fix it? And the challenge with leadership and training is, especially in the business world, is you don't train it. You do a couple of offsites a year, and for the most part, expect to become great leaders. It's a constant process, and you need constant feedback. And that's why these fast-forming teams are so effective, because the threshold's high, the humility's really high. There's no ego. So when you make a big mistake, they call you out, and everyone goes, okay, don't do it again, move on. And it's a quick, and that's when you can tell the team's highly functioning.
And so we've established where things are going, and so now I want to go back to agents, and I want to go back to machines. So imagine a high character person on a high performing team, and then this agentic suite. So we have Jacob Taylor in the audience. He's with Brookings and has just released a paper on vibe teaming, which is about groups of people leveraging AI and agents to perform better together. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit, Andy, of what you talked about with me about sort of the fighter pilots and the helmets and sort of like the human and machine lessons that we can take, not all of, but parts of, as our workplaces are going to become very agent heavy in not too long of the future.
I think some of the lessons we've seen, and these how they apply in your world, I'd love to hear from you as a group, but I think the idea in the F-35 program, if you're familiar with that helmet they designed with all the heads-up display, it's like a $500,000 helmet, and it brings all the data in of all the sensors. Anyway, it's a lot of information. So when they first built these things, and other sensors like it, the pilots talk about a helmet fire. They were like, my God, get this thing off me. There's just too much information. So what they realized very quickly was that they had to layer and obviously hierarchy the information coming in from obviously up to fire control, which would be the most critical, down to all the other things that's happening. And what the humans became, so the human starts to carve out a very defined role in the critical, ethical, character-based decision-making, and you're trying to get the machine to take those jobs away. And there's a little tension in that conversation because I don't trust the machine to do the job yet. And so that's the agentic stuff. It's got to, but for the most part, it's pretty good. And if it's not a critical decision, let it make a mistake and fix it. You know, it's not this idea of it has to be right. And I think what we've learned across all those platforms is the talent of the machine and the skill of the machine has a superpower in those things, and a lot of it is evolving as we speak. But the human side of the conversation is where you double down on those more human characteristics. So we call it just making humans more human. And it starts with that fundamental idea of letting yourself have those times to sit down as a group and a team and connect eye to eye and face to face and all those sorts of things, and community and everything you've heard here the last few days. And letting that become the essence of that relationship, but at the same time having a close synergy with the proxies and the agents, and coming in and out. And like any team, it's going to be bumpy. It's going to be rough. It's not perfect. I think people have this idea that a human and machine will be a perfect solution. It's not. It's better than a machine on its own. It's better than a human on its own. We've pretty much shown that in just about every relationship, but there's still mistakes to be made. So the trick is you just have to define your levels of risk and tolerance of risk within that hierarchy and where you want the information to transfer. And that's one of the first things you have to do.
Yeah. And so I really hope you're sort of catching this because it's fascinating. So one of the things that I'm obsessed by is biosynchrony. And so that is the way that our bodies start to line up in terms of heart rate variability, which we'll hear a little bit from later, pupil dilation, facial expression, auditory. There are things that humans do that our bodies do to get in sync. So we like to be in sync. And so I'm not quite there. You know, I haven't quite seen it yet, but what I've been searching for and what I'm obsessed by is, I think, you know, what we've laid out today is going to happen. And so imagine, like, I'm really intrigued by super teams, like a super team. And so that is a team that shares an agentic base. So right now today, you have your LLM, and if you go to a meeting, you sit down at a table, you know, you all have your own version of ChatGPT, and you're sort of like working it together. It's like a wheel. You're the hub of you're each a wheel. But where we're moving to is that teams will sit on top of an agentic base that is shared. And so all of the insights start to go into that. So Human+Tech, his ventures, Share Ventures, his whole team is on a shared agent base. They have 112 different models that they have running in it. And they iterate companies and products super fast. It's a foundry. So I think you're going to see that, and then you're going to see everyone understanding that it has to be about character and these other traits and the human interfaces that he described. And then we're going to get really interested in how we can optimize for that. Like my hope is the way that we optimize for sleep today, the way like you all have trackers, you kind of know what causes you to sleep. I think that we might get to a place where we do that for our ability to team. And I think that gets really interesting. So I'm obsessed. If you could design one thing, if you could change one thing about how, especially with your corporate teams, how people operate, what would be the thing that you would love to have happen?
In terms of building a team?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing, it has to be you. So it's a better you than better at what you do. So that self-awareness it's the sort of the antithesis of the no dickheads on teams rule. Like, you really have to understand yourself deeply. And so if you could do one thing, and that's where we always start. You've got to develop a high level of self-awareness and it doesn't have to be there's no good or bad. It's just an awareness. And with that, you can then participate on a team at a high level, because you're not going to be able to sit in a team and sacrifice your needs and wants and desires for the betterment of the team if you're not ready to sacrifice your wants and needs for the betterment of another person. So you've really got to, for all our programs, everything starts with the individual. Every team event starts with the individual, and there's a deep interoceptive process, and you can use widgets and data, and it doesn't really matter as long as you get that team to those individuals to that shared level of understanding, and then they get to that point where you can actually get them together as a team and have them functioning. And then what always gets left out is you do need good leadership. So people forget great teams typically have extraordinary leaders, and you do have to double down on that too. So that would be the thing that I think if you want to fast track your team, you've got to sort yourself out, and then you can be a better performer on the team.
And one of the other things that we've been chatting about is human in the loop versus human on the loop. And you had said that with these systems, these agents and swarms of agents. If you could talk about that a little bit, about how people being out of the decisions.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about is the human in the loop. I think you mentioned human on the loop. It's where we see most of the breakdowns in these programs is when the human in its decision-making process, or the authorities of the humans in the decision-making process, slowing it down. So it's a judgment call. Where do you want the human decision making and all those human qualities? Where do they matter, and where do you bring them in, and where do you let the rest of it run? And I think what we've seen very carefully is that for many of the mundane tasks, the machine's got you run, and so your human's not in the loop of every conversation, but the human gets the decision making gets elevated to you as the sort of critical decision maker in the system. And that can change too. And you see in these systems, those authorities change very quickly. Task dependency, authorities shift. So you're shifting where you make decisions and where you're not making decisions. And then in a really highly functioning team, even the authorities amongst the team. So the easy way to think about that is lead as well as you follow. So you've got to, at a certain point, whoever's near the problem, whoever's really close to the problem is making the decision. Everyone else falls behind them. So the leadership shifts very quickly. So as I said at the beginning, with humans, that's hard enough. People struggle with that shifting dynamic and shifting authorities and shifting leadership. Now you bring in machines who are participating in that conversation, and it gets complicated. And fundamentally, what we see, it comes back to, like I said, with the plane. It boils down to trust. Where do you trust the machine? Where do you trust the system? And can you let go? For many people, it's very hard to let go, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah. One of the things I recently, I've been thinking a lot about, I haven't used it yet, but I think, ultimately what I described, I think eventually, I've been calling it slipstreaming, and it's a way of moving in the currents, and so this made me, rabbit hole a little bit about geese in migration. And what I didn't know is that when they're in that V formation, that allows them to go faster than, and fly longer, and it's high performance for a goose. They actually, the front bird changes like every 5 to 7 seconds. They all share the role of buffeting the wind and being the lead for the V. It doesn't matter if it's a big bird, small bird, because it's physics. They all take the role. In addition, it doesn't matter like who's a pair or who's related or anything like that. They all take the role. And so I think it's really interesting and, an interesting, way of thinking about, in this future, how we're going to have to think about teams. So with that, thank you so much.
Very welcome. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.